Hi there, welcome back. So today we are going to talk about what goes into writing a good lead magnet. So the actual processes you should use to write your lead magnet to make sure that it's going to do for you what you want it to, that it's going to be well written, and that readers will really respond to it. Okay, so the first thing that I always teach is that you need to write any story from the inside out. What does that mean? Most people are pretty familiar with story templates, including plot points. Okay, so we have things like Save the Cat, we have the hero's journey, we have the Virgin's Promise, we have all these different story templates. And trust me, I know most of them. I think I have read almost every writing craft book known to man, okay? Well-versed in some, familiar with others. But the point is, these templates exist, and I have always been mostly in favor of them. Why is that? Because human beings are not just creatures that like story, okay? It is not just entertainment to us. It is not even just informational for us, okay? Stories are actually entirely necessary for human beings, for our mental health. If we didn't have them, our mental health would begin to slip, okay? Because stories are what help us understand our world, and without them, we would be completely lost. Generally, going throughout our day, we are not conscious of how often we encounter stories in our lives. Okay, we're always telling ourselves stories in our minds. We're always seeing them play out around us. But the other thing that most people don't realize is that the only way stories make sense is if they are based in some kind of emotion. So when I tell you to write the story from the inside out, you have to figure out the internal first. You have to figure out what the story means emotionally. So templates are all well and good, and I have taught them in the past. I actually do really like them because they illustrate the ways in which human beings naturally absorb story. And if you position your story to be in sync with that, you will automatically attract more readers and more loyalty from your readers, okay? I know there are people who don't like story templates, and understand, I am not talking about what to write in your story. You already have your story in mind. I'm talking about figuring out what the core of that story is about and how to convey that to the reader, okay? And once you do that, you're able to tell it with so much more authority and have so much more impact, okay? So it's about positioning the story that you have already come up with so that it automatically resonates with the reader. But again, you have to do it from the inside out, okay? Just using something like the hero's journey and saying, these are the plot points, and then trying to force those plot points. Again, people do have a lot of success. I've written, some of my past stories that way, and they do pretty well, okay? But it's just not optimal, because doing it that way is you writing it from the outside in, and you need to start with the internal and write it from the inside out. Okay, so that means that you need to figure out the internal first. And basically what you need to do is figure out what the character is grappling with. What are they trying to overcome? What are they struggling with? And then at each stage of the journey throughout your story, you need to figure out what it means to them internally. Okay, if you can do this first, you will already be way ahead of the curve compared to other authors in telling a very deep and cohesive story. And this is just as necessary for lead magnets as it is for any other book you may write. Do me a favor, guys, take just a second and hit subscribe and like, and make sure and hit that bell so you don't miss any future videos from me. Okay, so once you have figured out what your internal stuff is, then you're going to apply it to the external plot, which means that's when you're going to have templates, if you want to use templates, but it also could be that you've already figured out plot points for your story. You kind of know what's going to happen. You have some scenes in mind. Like I said, you just have to apply the internal to the external so that they work in tandem, okay? A great story is not all plot, but it's also not all internal, because that would just be someone staring at the wall while they're having feelings, right? Okay, it needs to be both. They need to work together cohesively to create a very well-rounded story. Now, if you're interested in finding out a little bit more about what plot points you really should have in your story, I actually have a free PDF for you. For anyone who wants it, you can just click, there's a link for it in the description below, and it is the 10 story elements that all bestsellers have. Okay, so that's a free PDF, so you can kind of look at it and kind of just do some checks and balances and make sure that you're hitting all of them in your story. Again, link below. All right, so the next thing that you're going to want to do is to enhance your theme through repetition and symbolism. Now, that sounds like a whole lot of big words, but it's not as hard as you think. When I say theme, I mean that thing you figured out for the internal. Whatever your character is struggling with and trying to overcome, that's really going to be the foundation of your theme. And the best way to really enhance that theme so that readers are really getting it is through symbolism and repetition. And of course, every author is going to do this a little bit differently, depending on your genre, depending on your style. I mean, you've got to figure out what works for you. But what I like to tell my students is to figure out what some symbols could be for what you're trying to say. Now, this, you can use anything at all as a symbol. Some really obvious ones would be, using black clothing for the villain, think Darth Vader, okay? Or maybe somebody sees a skull and crossbones and that's a death omen, things like that. Those are very obvious and almost cliche, but you just figure out some sort of symbol and then just plop it down in some of your scenes so that people are starting to almost subconsciously realize that that symbol is part of the theme. In terms of repetition, I would find some way to state the theme. It shouldn't be super obvious. You don't want your character suddenly stopping, turning to the audience and monologuing or anything like that, right? But just find some way to say it in dialogue, in the narrative, maybe on a marquee in the background, whatever works for you, but repeat that several times. The thing that's really great is that the first time you say it, your audience, of course, isn't going to really recognize it because it's the first time they're hearing it. The second time, they will recognize it, but they probably won't remember where they heard it before. They'll just kind of be like, huh, I think they said that before. Weird. And then the third time, that's when they'll really, really get it. Now, you can do it more than 3 times if you want, especially in a long book or a long series. You should probably do it more than 3 times. But in a lead magnet, which tends to be a little bit shorter, especially if you're doing a short story or a novella, just make sure you're hitting at least 3 times because that's when they really pick up the pattern. And that makes a really powerful story. Okay, repetition is one of the most powerful tools you have in your arsenal to really drive home the meaning of the story. So I would encourage you to do that in your lead magnets. Would you like to experience an exact step-by-step process for how to drill down to the story you're telling and build out from there? More than that, would you like to effortlessly create more super fans, garner better reviews, and sell way more books than ever before? If you answered yes to any of those questions, you are in luck. There is a specific technique that will allow you to drill down to the emotional core of your story and write it from the inside out. 90% of authors who are writing and publishing today are not doing this. But we're talking about up-leveling your storytelling technique and making you a master storyteller. This works for pantsers and plotters alike. It works for any genre, any trope, any type of story, any type of character. This is going to be a 12-week mastermind. So if you are ready to become a master storyteller and create a foundation for your fiction business in 2022, this is the mastermind for you. I'm taking applications right now and all the details are there. bit.ly/storyteller accelerator. And make sure and capitalize the S and the A because that will make a difference. I cannot wait for a select few of you to learn this technique because it will be a game changer for your fiction writing. And of course, the 5th element is to make sure that it is well edited. There are lots of ways you can do this. If you don't have the money to pay for a professional editor, that is okay. There are ways that you can figure out how to get good editors without, paying out the ears for them, okay? You can maybe swap with other authors. I really highly encourage critique groups. My critique group has changed my life and I've been with them for about 10 years. You can find a reader who happens to be pretty good at something like editing, someone who used to be a teacher or an English major. I will warn you that that is not quite the same thing as an editor, and so they're not going to be as good. But in the beginning, when you're getting started out and don't have a lot of money to drop for it, just find something like that in order to make sure that most of the typos have been taken care of. Most of the sentences have good structure. You're not repeating too many words, things like that, okay? So as I've talked about in other videos, your lead magnet needs to be just as polished, just as well edited as any book that you write, because this is the introduction to your writing. This is what your readers who download it are going to judge you as an author by this lead magnet, decide if this is something they want to read more of. So if it's full of all kinds of typos and run-on sentences and things that just make it really difficult to read, you're not going to get very many that are going to want to pay for your series, right? So you need to make sure that it is very, very well polished. Thanks for listening today and happy lead magnet writing. Bye.